everyone. Welcome. So this is a session about the university application process, what we do, how we work with your children. We're just curious, we wanted to know who you are, so we were wondering who has kids in MYP5? Let's see. Okay. And some kids in the audience.
So who's in MYP5?
Who's in MYP5? And parents of DP1 then? Okay, so half and half.
Great.
What's that? Yeah, so I'm Ingrid. I'm one of the university counselors.
I'm Brian. I'm the other university counselor.
We also have a part-time assistant during the fall, which is the busiest period for us, the fall semester. Carolina. She helps us out with all of the office and admin stuff. So you'll probably see her around in admissions as well. That's where she's at in the spring.
And all three of us can be reached at the university's email address. So that's sort of just one stable address to remember. We, of course, have individual emails as well, but this gets to all of us, so it's the way to go.
So just in general, a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover. Just what our role is, the timeline for the applications here at the school, how we work. We're going to compare the three most popular systems for our students, the US, the UK, and the Netherlands. And also we're going to show you the calendar for the DP1 students, who's the group we're working with at the moment. So great. So what do? We are counselors. We provide counseling about universities. We try to help students research what the best options are for them. We answer their questions. A lot of our work also has to do just with coordinating all the documents that need to be sent to the different universities. We also have to write the testimonials, which is the big recommendation letter that counselors write for students for certain university systems, like for the US. That's required for the US system. Some other university systems only require recommendation letters from teachers. So what we do is that we work with the teachers to make sure that they have those letters ready, and we send them to each university. We also organize the transcripts for all of the students. We submit those. We make sure that they're correct. We act as advocates for students, so we support them. We try to show their best side. We don't lie to universities, but we try to portray them as positive as we can. We try to highlight all those really great things that they have, because they're all great in their own way. Some of them are really talented academically. Some of them have other extracurricular talents, so we try to highlight all of those things for the universities. And another really big piece of what we do is host visitors from different universities. This academic year that hasn't ended, we had 80, that's 80 universities visiting, mostly from the US, but also from Europe. We organize one big university fair where we also invite all of the Dutch universities to come and meet with our students and talk to them about their universities. So that's a really big piece of what we do. And something really important is we try to align our work with the mission of UWC. We try to make sure that the students are being part of the UWC experience and really living this experience without really making it all about universities, but trying to also understand that the universities piece is quite important. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but we try.
All right, then it falls to me to sort of clarify the things that aren't what we do as university counselors. The first of which is the application itself. That ultimately, for students, this is their education in their life, and also in just a logistical sense, there's a part of the application that is theirs to do, and so we take student responsibility quite seriously. There's also, in addition to the philosophical side of that, the sheer reality that there are now in the DP1 class 176 students, and coming up after them about the same number of students. So there are roughly 350 DP students that the two of us work with the assistance of Carolina. And so every minute that we're chasing them down for things is a minute that we can't spend actually advising students and helping them to really understand the parts of the process that they don't. And there's simply no way we could apply for all of those students, even if we wanted to. And we don't, right? This really is something that rests first and foremost with them, and we're here to help them through the whole thing. Likewise, that means that we don't sit there and check through every detail of applications. There's some application systems like the United Kingdom where we see what they've written before it gets sent off, and we read over that, and if there's something we feel they really ought to address, we'll send it back to them to work on it. But in most cases, we don't see what the students send. There's a part of the application that comes from the school. There's a part of the application that comes from the student. If they'd like help with it, we're happy to give them feedback on it. The more time they give us to give them feedback, the more detail we can do that with. So if they come to us the night before it's due, they're probably not going to get feedback. If they come right when we've set an internal deadline, it will be pretty cursory, but if they come well in advance, that's where we're really happy to help them work through how it's going to look from an admission officer's side, how one system's requirements are a little bit different from another, give them samples. Likewise, we've got great support. So the English department devotes a period of time to working on essays and personal statements each fall for the DP2 class. And then Dougal within the English department is going to do a special clinic on personal statements for the UK. So this is where our colleagues are huge, huge support. Likewise, we don't tell students where to apply. Sometimes we advise gently, sometimes we advise much more strongly, but ultimately those decisions rest with the students. One little caveat that I want to make is that we do set some boundaries. So we have, and for a minute we'll flip to something we call a blue card. This is a zoomed in version. It's a blue card because it's blue. And this is the internal contract that students have with us. And it does have some boundaries on it that we support 8 applications, which is a little bit different from 8 universities because there's some systems where you apply in a very centralized fashion. So by and large here in the Netherlands, you apply through StudyLink, and that sets its own limits, so we treat that as a single application. In the United Kingdom, you apply through one unified system to up to 5 universities. In our eyes, that's a single application. University of California, all of those are a single system, single application. But otherwise, each university is its own, and we set a boundary of 8 total applications, and no more than 6 U.S. applications to what are called the Davis Partner Schools, which are, I believe it's 91 universities now that have a financial aid agreement with the United World Colleges and provide some really wonderful support for students of financial need. But the reality of that is that then our students and students at UWCs are in a sense competing with each other. And so we want to make sure that we're being fair about that. Also, ultimately, students get to go to one university at a time. And so we feel by setting some boundaries around how many universities they can apply to, that pushes them to do their research ahead of time and to make thoughtful decisions so that when time comes to choose, they really are in a position to make a good choice. And last week, we communicate this to universities, and so they take our students' applications more seriously because they know that they haven't put out 50 applications just to see what happens, that each choice they make is a considered choice, and therefore one to be taken seriously. When we sign off on this, we work very hard to make sure that there are very good, secure, financially viable options on that list, as well as, options that are maybe less certain, more of a reach. And we'll work extensively with students to make sure that when we see that full set, it could be just one university or up to 8 applications, that they're going to be in good shape. But ultimately, those remain the students' applications and their choices. To go back real quick, one more. Actually, I love this part because, as Ingrid said, it means we get to advocate for each and every student because we're not the ones making the decision. Especially with our students, I would never want to be in that place. We get to tell them all the wonderful things about everyone. Sometimes in the case of nominations, working with tutors and with the leadership team, we are in a position of needing to decide who we're nominating for a particular scholarship. But the decisions don't rest with us. Those are with the universities themselves. It also means that it's not always 100% certain. Some university systems, it's very clear. You need 30 points. You need 36 points in these subjects. Other systems, it isn't. And so we have a lot of historical data and experience, but sometimes it's not completely certain. And then this last one really gets to the philosophy point, that we're here to help students find paths that are really great for them. I don't think there is a best university any more than there's a best person, right? There are universities that are really good for particular people, for particular goals, and we're here to help figure that out. But the last thing we're going to do is sort of pull out a world ranking and say, oh, let's just look at the top. For certain students, those may be great places. For others, they certainly aren't. And we want to work to find an individually good place. There's the blue card again. So Ingrid mentioned that we really try to integrate our work into the broader philosophy of the school. And ultimately, that means seeing UWC as a really rich, personal, academic experience, something that challenges students, that pushes them to see the world differently, to think about what their place is in that world. And then what we want is for decisions about what comes after UWC to grow organically out of that, out of the passions that they have, about the questions that they've got, the ways that they think they can have an impact, the ways they can think they can build the lives that they want. What we don't want to do is sort of start from day one and say, where do you want to go to university? What are the things that will impress that university? And so we try to frame that very carefully. That said, some university systems have more specific requirements for particular courses, and we want to make sure that if students have particular goals or areas of central interest, that they're taking courses that put them in a good position for that. For that reason, we just, on Monday, we're speaking with the NYP5 students at Assembly, and then May 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, we have time slots for NYP5 students to sign up if they have questions about course selection going into next year. We do that again with DP1 students because the class gets much, much larger at the beginning of DP1, and so we're here for all of them. But after that course selection advising at the beginning of DP1, we step into the background for a little while. And the DP experience is really intense, and we want students to embrace that experience, for all that it involves. And then we start talking with them again really in the spring of DP1, which is where we are now. So, Ingrid, do you want to expand on any of that or show that chart?
For the subjects?
Yeah.
So we actually just prepared this little list, and we shared it with all of the NYP5 students because we know, as Ryan also mentioned, that there are certain subjects that are a little bit tricky in comparison to others. So we created this list that has those subjects that are a little bit specific in terms of what they require for IB students. So we put it together. We actually printed this list and gave it to everyone to make sure that they have it in their hands. So all NYP5s have this. We also send it to them. They have it in their email. Just to make sure, again, that they're informed when they're making the subject selection for DP1. And we have, again, our most popular systems, Canada being the other one after the Netherlands, the UK, and the US. So this is why those are the countries that are there. Of course, if there are students who have who are thinking about applying to university in other countries, that's why we set up the times for them to come and meet so that we can talk about that. And then we are going to do that now, starting on the 22nd of May. We have a little sign up on our door. We told the students, so it's there. In case any of your students, if they're interested in having that meeting, please remind them that we are available for that. But we are also going to be available again during the fall semester when the new DP1 students arrive. We're going to be there again, available during the academic fair, to make sure that they are choosing the right subjects depending on their interest. So that's basically what we do at the sort of NYP 5 level. Then during the fall semester, the spring semester, of the DP1, we ask all students to fill out a form that we call the intake sheet. Before they have their first meeting with us, we ask them to fill that out with all of their personal information, what school they're coming from, what subjects they're taking, what they're hoping to do in university, and then we have that initial meeting with them just to get to know them a little bit better. And then we also start with workshops about different university systems so that they're a little bit more informed about how the process works in each country. Yesterday, we had a session about applying to UK universities. Next week, we're going to have one about the US system. The following week, one about the Netherlands. We already had one about the Canadian system. And then sometimes we also have some university visits in the spring. They don't happen very often, but we have some. And some great news that I really want to share because I'm very excited about this. We normally have those meetings at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, which we understand is very complicated, in particular for the non-residential students, but there's so much happening at the school that we don't really know when to have these meetings because we're always told, oh no, but they have CAS, or but they need to be doing this, that other thing. But now it has just been confirmed that now we have space on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays during lunchtime to host this session starting next academic year. So I'm really, really excited about that because that also means that we get to go home a little bit earlier because sometimes we have to stay here until 8, 9 p.m. when there are university interviews. So, of course, some of those will still happen at those times where we're going to try to make sure that the important sessions explaining different systems and the things that are mandatory for all students happen during lunchtime just to make sure that everyone can make it and everyone can be here. But there will be times when universities want to come and visit, and if they cannot make it during lunch, we're probably going to say, okay, when can you make it? And yeah, there's some negotiation that needs to happen. We try to make sure to tell students that, you know, if they have class, if they have CAS, surveys, if that's mandatory, that they need to really communicate with their supervisors to make sure that they have permission and they can make up the hours to come to these sessions, because we try to convey the message that everything is important. Yeah. We also have some university admissions tests in the spring for DP1 students. For the US in particular, we are a test center for both the SAT and the ACT exams that are required in the US. The majority of our students are not quite ready to take the exam in the spring. We still offer it in the fall. We try to work with students individually during those intake meetings to still give them all the information they need. We post the deadline so that they know what's happening. But the majority of our students prepare over the summer to take those tests. US universities tend to be pretty understanding of the fact that UWC is not really the type of school where we put a lot of emphasis in test preparation or in test taking. So they know that the scores for our students are not the same as the scores that US students tend to have. Obviously, in general, international students tend to score a little bit lower than the US counterparts. And even US citizens living abroad, universities understand that they're in a different system where the tests are not really what they are in the US. So that's something that you should also be aware of. So that's for the spring semester DP1. Before all the DP1s go on summer break, we're going to give them a long list of homework and things that they need to be doing over the summer. So it would be great if you can help us with us and help us with all of that and just check to see if those things are being done over the summer. Like filling out the self-assessment form, which is like the intake sheet, but a little bit longer and more of a reflection where we want to see how they feel that they've grown during their DP1 year, all the things that they're hoping to achieve during DP2, all of the activities they completed this year. So just a bit more of a detailed form that then later on that helps us to write all those testimonials that we can send to universities. So that's very, very important. They also need to be compiling all of the documents that they need for university applications, past transcripts from their previous school if they weren't students here. If they were students here, we have those. We always need the original plus the English translation of the past 2 years. The financial aid forms for international students. If they're international, they can already start filling those out over the summer with you, obviously. Also, they need to inform us if they're doing an early application for a university. And we start working during the summer. I mean, we don't really stop working. We really need to know over the summer what the plans are for students so that we can start preparing and organizing everything and make sure that they are on track, because the early applications are really, really early, and there isn't that much time once we come back after the break to make sure everything's ready to be sent. So that's why we have a deadline over the summer. Then during the fall semester, when they come back after that summer, they're submitting that self-assessment. There are more admissions tests for the US and also the UK. We are a test center for some of those tests required for the UK, not for all. The students have that information. More presentations, lots of presentations. As I said, this academic year we've had so far in total 80 universities visited us. We also have individual meetings with students. They need to request them. Some students don't need a lot of help. If they're applying to the Netherlands, for example, there is very little that they need to discuss with us. But for the students that want to meet, want to keep talking, need more help with their applications, we're here. But even if, maybe the student is going back home to their country after graduation, we still, want to hear from them and know what's happening, because sometimes, the time we spend chasing after students is time that we can actually spend meeting with other students and talking about plans and helping them. So that's also very important. Students also during the fall need to submit the famous blue card. So this is where they write all of their choices. So the good thing about the blue card is that it forces students to come to our office, because it's a little piece of paper. It's a tangible thing that they need to give to us. So we always tell them, no, you cannot just drop it under the door. You need to come and talk to us. That way we make sure that there are some viable options, or at least one viable option for the student, and that we're informed also, and that we know where we need to be sending all of those application documents. Because as Brian mentioned, there's a part that the student sends, but then there's a part that we need to send. So we need to know where and when, by when. So this is very, very important. Then during the spring semesters, the students are confirming their offers. Then they need to inform us where they're going. This is where things tend to get a little bit tricky. Because even though in the blue card we have some type of ranking where we're telling them, asking, what's your first choice? What's your second choice? What's your third choice? Every year it happens that we come to April and we need to know where they're going, because we need to send the final IB results. And unfortunately, the deadline for us to make that request is on May 1st, which every year tends to happen during a school break. So we need to do it before the school break, when we can still chase after the students and find them in school. And students sometimes are not certain of where they're going yet by that time. So it's very important for us that they already have a decision, because you can still request final IB results, but the reality is that you will have to wait until those results are ready, and you'll have to pay to request for those if we don't do it. So it's better for everyone, and also for us, just to know what's happening, where they're going. Because we've been working with them, and it's also just nice to know what the final results are. So, yeah.
All right, so with the students, we meet with them one-on-one, and then we have these repeated sessions. We're going to try to give you a sort of crash course version of that we're going to talk very, very quickly through a lot of the things that we talk about individually with students about what might shape their decisions, and then give you a quick overview of different systems. With students, we spend about an hour on each of those systems, and these meetings run a full period. Sort of broadly thinking in terms of, there's questions of what a student is looking for in a university, and so that's academic, that's also the living environment and the place that they're in, what they want to do afterwards. So some of that is very much focused on particular course offerings that they have, but it's also philosophical approaches. There's some university systems that expect students to know very precisely what they want to study the day that they step in the door or when they apply. And there are other university systems where the first couple of years they're not allowed to declare what they're studying. And only maybe at the end of the second year do they then make those decisions, and they might be able to choose multiple things. And everything in between. So those are important things for students to be thinking about. Interdisciplinarity has great advantages, and many students are very drawn to that. Other students feel like, I don't ever want to take another math course or another art course. Like, this is what I love. Please let me do it. And those are things that they should think about. There are also questions about what kind of environment do they want to be in. You know, are they looking for really small classes and close interactions with professors? Are they looking for some independence and some freedom? Do they want to be at a place that focuses on a lot of research, or a place, you know, that has a very balanced vision of what student life is? More experiential, less, those kinds of things. Obviously, countries matter a lot. They have family that they want to be near, new parts of the world they want to see. And then all of the other things that come with those experiences, being in a city, being in a more rural location, being in a place that's a little sunnier than the Netherlands, being in a place that's still the Netherlands because they love it so much. All of that. Certainly, you know, co-curricular life is a rich part of the program here at UWC. Many students want to find a university that has some of that. Others say, like, I've done my CAS requirements. Once again, let's try something different. And that's all beautiful, and that's where we want to start the conversation. There are also constraints, doors that are not as open as others. And we encourage the students to think about the opportunities that they do have rather than the ones that they don't, because students here are faced with a wonderful array of options, but those options are different for each student. Finances come up in essentially every conversation that we have, and we understand that. And so we talk pretty frankly about that, and students, you'll need to talk pretty frankly with your children about what's possible, what's reasonable, you know, what you're prepared to do. Many of you, by virtue of living here in the Netherlands, have, through your tax money, supported brilliant universities, and that may be a really, really good option. And there are other systems that, you know, because they're private or because you're not a citizen, are really expensive. And for other people, the calculation of what's affordable may be actually completely reversed because of financial aid. Obviously, one of the questions on the intake sheet is, what are your parents expecting? Please ask them. And again, to have conversations there with them about what's important to you for them, and where their ideas match up with your expectations. Especially in the age of Trump, citizenship comes into play for some folks. But also just in terms of which, some university systems use citizenship, some use residency as the deciding factor for what their tuition fees are. What sorts of scholarships and financial aid are available in different places is often quite dependent on nationality and residency. And then, of course, themselves. There are some university systems where all you need to do is have your diploma. Getting the IB diploma is an accomplishment in of itself. But there's some places where all that they ask is that you earn the diploma. 24 points or 44 points, it doesn't make a difference. There are other university systems that expect, 776 in higher level subjects for this particular program, and there's everything in between. And so we want to make sure that students are looking at what is reasonable and appropriate. So that's the quick version. Now we're going to do also an accelerated version of a walkthrough of the Netherlands, the US, and the UK, and focusing on those sort of big things that came up. What's their approach to academics in that given system? What's their approach to student life? What does that look like financially, both in terms of just what the prices are, and then if those prices are out of reach, what are the options? We'll also talk just a little bit about the application process, because that's very different in each system. All right, I'm going to take a crack at the U.S., and then you'll take
Actually, I want to start with the...
Oh, yeah, the chart.
So the chart is very important. This is something that's part of the profile that we send to universities that has the percentages of where our students went from the class of 2016, so last year. 36% to the U.S., 4% Canada, 15% the Netherlands, 2% Asia, 1% Middle East, other Europe 10%, UK 13%. Our gap year, 19%. So that's an interesting but not completely accurate number. Out of that 19%, there are some very legitimate gap year options that students have found. Some of them that went back to their countries because they needed to do military service. They wanted to work for a year, travel for a year. But in that number, we also have all of those students that never really came to our office, so that we are a bit uncertain of what they're doing right now. Many of them is because they went back to their home countries and they don't really need anything from us. They just need to go, show that they have the IB diploma, sometimes write an exam, and then they're into university. They don't need teacher recommendation letters. But we would like to know, even if that's the situation for some of your children, so that this looks a bit more accurate, because this is not accurate. This includes some of those kids that we are not really certain where they are. So, yeah.
The other thing that's probably worth noting about this is 2016 data. We're just about at the point where we can put together this next class. And I think the numbers are going to look a little bit different. And part of that is the changing makeup of the school that we're now. So we're seeing it a little bit now, and certainly in the upcoming DP1 class, that it's about an even split between day and residential students. And I think that'll change this a little bit. And citizenship isn't up here. It'd be too messy a way to break it apart. But I think one of the important dividing lines would be whether students hold European citizenship or residency or not. I think that plays in significantly to where they end up going. Now I'll do the quick run through. Sorry that this is small. As I said, we'll distribute it to you, and there's a handbook that has lots of details, but we can talk through those broad categories. I think the key thing in terms of academic approach in the United States is that generally it's the liberal arts or liberal arts and sciences model, which emphasizes that students should be broadly educated in addition to having a narrow disciplinary focus. And so often for the first year and a half, there's a lot of emphasis, like the IB, of taking courses in different areas. And throughout what is a 4-year bachelor's undergraduate experience, even when students have chosen a particular area, a major that they're focusing on, that's only about a third of their courses. So it's possible for them to focus in more than one area. Could be allied fields like biology and chemistry, or it could be, my sister studied political science, French, and theater, and managed to make that all work. And that's something that's kind of uniquely possible in the US model, partly because it takes a little longer as a 4-year bachelor's. Engineering is the notable exception to this. Art is also sometimes an exception. In terms of living dynamic, many US universities, not all of them, but the ones that are most popular amongst our students, are residential campus communities, where at least for the first couple of years, students are living in dorms with roommates, meals are provided, and then a little bit more freedom as they get into their upper class years, but it's very possible to spend all 4 years living on a campus. When it comes to prices, I guess the limited good news is that means that the prices tend to include things like housing and food costs. The bad news is that they're astronomical prices, that the official sticker price for many US universities, the total cost is now getting close to $70,000 US a year. There's some places where it's only maybe $40,000 a year, but for non-citizens, it's very, very expensive. The counterbalance to that is that in the US as well, those prices are out of reach for many, many people, and so there are robust financial aid schemes. Usually, if you are not an American citizen or a green card holder, that financial aid is not available to you. One of the wonderful things about being at United World College is that there's an incredibly generous donor, Shelby Davis, who has worked with universities for 15 years to make it so that UWC graduates have access to financial aid. It's need-based financial aid, and the universities do those calculations to figure out what a family is expected to pay. And they're not necessarily very generous in those calculations, but their goal is to make it possible. With saving, with investing over a period of time, but to make it just possible that you could pay those bills. And that means that some of our students who are coming with no financial resources at all, their expected family contribution is 0, and they're able to go to university in the U.S. even if they're orphans, even if they're coming from just absolute poverty. If you're coming from a more of a middle income, this can be a big gray area, and that's one of our greatest challenges, is working with students to try to get a sense of how likely they are to get financial aid and at what level. So for some people, the U.S. is by far the least expensive option, and for many others, it's by far the most expensive. The last thing to note is a little bit about the application process, because it's strange and complicated, and it takes a lot of energy from them and from us. It's what's called holistic, which means that instead of treating the student based exclusively on their grades, they're looking at their grades, but everything else in context. And they're admitting students to the university rather than to a particular class. And so they're interested in what that student is like outside of the classroom, how they'll engage in that broader community. So in addition to grades, they want recommendation letters from 2 teachers, a very detailed letter from the counselor, the activity list from the students, essays that are often these sort of much more narrative stories that give a sense of the motivations and the philosophy, the personality of a student. Because there's not a very standardized curriculum in the United States, they typically ask for SAT or ACTs, which we've talked about a little bit. And then, of course, the grades of the student. And there, instead of just looking at what their anticipated grade is, they're interested in a 4-year record of the student's achievement. So that includes MYP and MYP 4 and 5 grades. It includes a transcript grade at the end of DP1, as well as one in November and then again in February of DP2. So they want to see the whole picture, which is great. They can see a lot of individuality about a student. It's also a lot of work. Anything else to add on the U.S.?
No, I think that's it. And also just a bit of a reminder, since Brian mentioned the financial aid from the Shelby Davis Foundation, that it's a need-based award, so it's financial aid and not a scholarship, because a lot of students tend to talk about getting a scholarship to go to the U.S., and the reality is that the majority of our students do not get scholarships to go to the U.S. They get financial aid. So that's just something, with a bit of a reminder in terms of that. And what makes the U.S. also a bit of a different system, the fact that our students are allowed to access the financial aid opportunities, whereas in other parts of the world, mainly Europe, the option is usually a scholarship, which means that it's academic based, pretty much. So, the Netherlands. The Netherlands, out of these 3 systems, is by far the easiest, the one where they need the least help from us. Students apply for a specific course, so they need to know most of the times what they're interested in. There are a few options at the university colleges where it's a bit more of a liberal arts approach, following a bit of the U.S. style of a broader educational approach. 3 years or 4 years for applied sciences. We have very few students who apply to universities of applied sciences, but it does happen as well. And the applied sciences are a little bit more skill-based, more practical in comparison to the research universities. And there are a few courses that are only available at the universities of applied sciences, like physiotherapy, hotel management. So a few of those things that need a lot of practical work. The timeline for the application really depends a little bit on the program. So this is something that we encourage students to look and be careful with, because the applications deadlines can start January 15th all the way to May 1st. So they have that huge sort of window to prepare and send their applications. But we're always asking students, if they're applying to the Netherlands, to not wait until that May 1st deadline, because that's a little bit too late, and then that gives us a bit of trouble in terms of knowing where we need to send their So mostly, the application is mostly based on their grades, so on the grades they have on their transcript. And again, just like the application timeline, it varies a lot in terms of the course they're applying for. The certain programs are very, very competitive. These are called numerus fixus. These are programs that have a limit on the number of students that can go into those programs. Those have a deadline of January 15th. And the way the applications work is that the students are ranked according to their academics. They are often asked to write an essay stating their interest. And there is also often another little piece which depends on the university and the specific program. It can be an interview. Sometimes it's an exam, an online-based exam. So 3 sort of major components for the numerus fixus programs. Then there are other programs that are a bit more competitive, like at the university colleges, where sometimes they will have a specific grade requirement for the IB program, like 30 points on the IB, 32 points. And then there are other programs that will only want students to pass the IB. So they only want 24 points. So everything is available. So that's the good thing about the Netherlands. It's a matter of finding the program and seeing what that program requires. In terms of the fees, is great for European students. The fees are, well, really, really low for a great quality of education. So we always try to talk to students and see, what about the Netherlands? Have you considered the Netherlands? It's a great option. Finances, so around 2,000 euros for tuition. The university colleges are a little bit more expensive. For non-EU, the situation is different. It's a little bit more expensive, around 8,000 for non-EU, so that's also another aspect to consider. Unlike the US, in the Netherlands, some university colleges will have the accommodation sort of included, and it's part of the experience that the student has to choose to be part of that if they're applying to a university college. At other universities, that's not the case. They have to find their own accommodation. They can have roommates. So then the cost of the living cost can really vary depending on where they're going. So that's a little bit different. And unfortunately, very few merit scholarships. There are some out there, but few. And again, scholarships, what scholarship means, it's academic base mainly. The application cost, usually none. The process of applying, it's through StudyLink, which is a government website where they have to register when they're applying, but they also need to submit their application through the university. So it's a bit of it's a 2 process. They need to apply to the university, but also make sure that they're completing an application on StudyLink. Unlike the common application for the US, StudyLink is much more of a straightforward thing, just their name, their information, very few things that they need to put in there, but students always need to make sure that they're doing both. So that's very, very important. We always try to remind them. The UK, it's a little bit similar to the Netherlands in the sense that students have to apply for a particular program of study. They need to be certain of what they want to do. Although there are a few university college style universities where they can do more of a liberal arts approach if they're unsure of what they want to study. It's usually 3 years in England. In Scotland is 4 years. The reason is that in Scotland, even though they still have to apply for a particular program, there is a bit of room and flexibility to take a few courses that are not really just part of that program that they're doing. So it's a little bit more, there's a bit more freedom. The emphasis is very academic as well, but a bit more, even more specific than in the Netherlands, in the sense that the UK will usually say, the universities will state clearly, if you're doing the IB, we need to see that you have 32 points. But also out of those 32 points, we need to see that you have 2 7s and 1 6 in your higher levels. Or some universities will say we want 35 points, but we only need 3 6s in your higher levels. So the conditions are very, very specific for the students. So the thing that the students really need to do is make sure they're doing their research properly, because for most programs you'll have options. You'll have universities that are going to ask for 24 points total, others that are going to want 45 points total. So it's up to the student to do that research depending on where they're at academically. And again, we always encourage them to have, to dream a little bit. Yes, they can have a top choice, but also have an insurance choice, something that is a little bit more manageable and realistic, and that can actually happen. In terms of testing, there are a few exams. We offer some here at the school. Mostly, so medicine always requires, and some other medical fields as well, they always will require a test. Law, sometimes, not always. There are certain universities that do not require an entrance test. Oxford also has some exams that are required depending on the course that the student is doing. The majority we do offer here at the school in the fall semester. The cost. So the cost, again, like in the Netherlands, it's a little bit different for European students and for non-EU students. So the price really varies a lot, from £9,000 to, it could go all the way up to 30,000 if a student is not from the EU. And the other thing that in the UK is important to consider is that citizenship is important, but also the residency status. They need to get the fees that match their passport. They need to be residents in the last 3 years to make sure they get those fees. So a little bit different than the Netherlands in that sense. Again, few scholarships. The ones that do exist usually don't cover the full cost. But a great option for our students is Scotland. Well, for EU students is Scotland because the tuition is free. Very recently, the British government just announced that the fees are going to remain the same in spite of Brexit for the students starting their course in 2018 and 2019, and they're going to remain that for the 3 or 4 years that they're going to be studying there. So, DP1s and MYP5s, you're good with Scotland. So that's a great option for our EU students as well. In terms of the application cost, if they're only applying to one course, one university, it can be £13. If they're applying to all the options they have, it's $24. So the way the application works is through a website that is called UCAS. They have to create an account, put all of their information. We as counselors input their grades, not the grades that you see in the report that you get, but a set of grades that are called the predicted grades, and that for some reason here at the school they're called anticipated grades. I'm still unsure of why we use that different name, but they mean the same thing. So those are the grades that the UK universities are really interested in, and those are based on the grades that you see in the reports. So teachers look at those things, that all the essays, the exams, the class participation, everything that the student has done in class, and then they base that prediction that they anticipate the grade that the student is hopefully going to get in May, and those are the grades that the UK universities are really interested in. So when we're talking about the universities asking for 32 points, 34 points is the anticipated or predicted grade that the student gets. Do you want to add something to that?
Well, mostly because our DP2 students are very aware of this at the moment. One difference that comes with that is that offers to UK universities are conditional on getting a particular set of marks on the exams, and so they'll say you're admitted if you get, the 37 total and the 6 in these 2 subjects. Whereas in the United States, generally that's not the case, provided a student continues in essentially the same performance that they've had. They're not looking for particular scores on particular exams. And generally in the Netherlands, there are a few, like Amsterdam now has a program that is conditional, but generally the condition is the completion and earning of the diploma. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. That's a lot, and we want to get to your questions and let you go home at some point. We're going to just very quick zoom in on the calendar right now for GP1, some of those sessions. These are also announced by email and in the director's bulletin. But so you see them. On Tuesday, there was a session about the UK. This coming Tuesday, likewise, there'll be one about the US. There was a Canadian one a little ways back. Then we actually have some of our first visits, Rochester and Brandeis. Those are universities both in New York?
Yeah.
Yeah, both.
Oh, no, Brandeis is in Massachusetts.
Who are coming to visit, and they'll do their particular presentation, and that's a chance to also understand a little bit more about how different U.S. universities operate and present themselves. Then we have a guest from Utrecht coming, but she is going to do a very nice overview of the entire Dutch system. It's Tuesday, May 23rd. Then for students who are considering early application, there's not really a lot of pressure for this, but students who are interested in medicine, veterinary science, or dentistry in the UK, or Oxford or Cambridge, that deadline sneaks up very, very early. Any early decision in the United States or an early action, some of the bigger, more competitive merit scholarships, those all come quite early. And so students who feel like they have a really strong record, a very clear direction, and by the end of DP1, they feel like they know what they want to do. We're going to want to know from them over the summer, I believe August 14th. And so we want to have a meeting with those students Tuesday, May 30th, to make all of that super clear so that they're in a good place for it. For students who are looking at the US, there are a couple of SAT, so a little bit strange. The regular standard SAT just happened, and the only spring SAT is for subject tests, which are used at the most selected US universities. And then the ACT in June. All the registrations passed for that. But as we said earlier, for most of our students, taking the SAT or the ACT in the fall of their DP2 year is really the best choice, particularly in terms of just building the skills and using the skills that they built throughout the diploma program. So it's not something that you should be terribly stressed about if you didn't already know about it. Yeah. In the fall.
So over the summer, we need to know if the students are doing an early application, just to make sure that we have everything ready for them, because the deadlines come up really, really soon. And we always ask students to inform us of any sort of earlier than January deadline 1 month in advance. You have no idea how many times we had students coming into our office the day before a deadline saying, "Hey, I'm applying to this place." So we try to avoid that with this, just to make sure we have everything ready and everything is actually of quality. We always send everything, but we cannot guarantee that it's going to be good if we're informed the night before. So September 1st, all of this sort of strange vocabulary, it's already explained to your kids, so link or add the buzzword for the UCAS, so the UK application. We need that by September 1st. Another ACT exam in September. The famous blue cards. They will be due September 15th for the students who are doing early applications, because the ones applying early, we also need to know that they have a backup plan, because what ends up happening is that the early applications tend to be to the most competitive programs or universities, so we also need to know that the student has other options, so that's why we want to see the full list in order to make sure that we can actually support that very, very competitive application. Then they need to complete and have finished their UK application too. That's the release of the UK early application. The self-assessment for the rest of the students, so the big form with all of their activities. They need to submit that to us in October. We ask them that they start filling it out during the summer, but they can continue adding the things that they're going to do, because they'll only know after they come back and they're sign up for certain activities. So that's why we give them a little bit more time to all of those applying regularly. Then creating their application for the US, the UK. We need to add, as we mentioned, the transcripts, the grades, and the testimonial from universities. So that's why we need to be linked to their applications somehow. So we're asking them to create the application so that we can see that it exists, that they're doing it early enough, so that we can make sure that the 175 of them have everything they need. Is there more? I think there's more. Yep.
Test dates.
So more test dates. We will probably have an October ACT. It's still tentative, but we're hoping we can. SAT in November 7th, November 27th. We need the blue cards with all of the university choices for all of the students. Of course, we need to actually talk to them. We don't want just the blue cards under our office door. We want to see the faces. December 2nd, we have another SAT. December 9th, ACT. And then for the MYP 5s, June 9th, ACT. Brief calendar. And for more information about all of the systems, how we work, we have a handbook. If you've seen our section on the website, you will see at the bottom, you can download the handbook that has all of the information about the different systems, what we do, and sort of a step-by-step on how to do the applications, and a few websites and resources that the students can look at to find some more help. So, yeah. That's it.
That is, that's the short version, right?
Yeah.
We know it's a lot. That's part of why that handbook is there. But we're also here to answer questions if there are any.
Just one clarification about this calendar.
Yes.
That DP1 Fall 2017 is not about the MYP5 date. It's
No,
about
this is the current DP1.
dates.
Yeah.
They're actually DP2 at that time.
Sorry, wait. Let me confirm that.
Yes, that's
Yes, they're
That's
actually
right.
DP2 at that time.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So much information for her.
Yeah, no, useful clarification.
Yeah.
It's very practical. So, would it be possible that we would get all those slides through email?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when this will happen?
We can send it to you tomorrow.
I think we should be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of making sure that we're clear on which iSAMS button gets to
Yeah.
the right parent
Yeah.
file.
So do you need like our emails or
No,
it will
we
go
have
generally?
that as a school. We have that in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
system, and so that'll be the key thing is just making. Since
Yeah.
we're normally sending it to the students, making sure that we've got the right email list.
Thank you.
But yes, we'll happily send that out.
The two handbooks you showed in the slide, there was one 216-17 and there was one 218. Which
Yes.
one should we look into?
Probably the more recent one, because the only thing that they differ in is the dates, like the deadlines for the students or the dates for the exams. So we're always working with the DP1s, so sometimes those dates will have to do with that particular graduating class for that year. So all of the information is the same, but the deadlines will vary.
Buzzwords, things like that. So the differences are all subtle, but yeah.
Yeah.
Those dates.
Yeah, the IB program. So two subjects are sciences. The sciences you can take. But some courses at university they request 3 sciences.
Small number two, yes.
So
Yeah.
what's the solution for them?
I'm guessing medicine in the Netherlands is the one that you're
Yeah.
referring to.
Yes.
That's the one that we encounter. So they need to have those 3 sciences before they make their application, which is due January 15th of their DP2 year. There are summer courses that can be taken, so those would need to be taken between DP1 and DP2 years. There are very, very rare situations where students' timetables are adjusted in line with that, but it's trying to fit 3 sciences into the IB curriculum is not generally a wise thing to do. So the summer course is the most useful approach, most of the time.
And who offers those summer courses?
So there is an institute called Boswell Beta in Utrecht.
Yeah.
It's a bit pricey. The students have to pay for the cost of the exam itself. They can prepare on their own, or they can also do the summer course there at that institute. That's all listed on the table that we gave out to the MYP5 students now that they're choosing their subjects. We do have cases, special cases of students who have the 3 sciences in their subject packages. The main issue tends to be the scheduling, if that actually fits in their timetable. Some students then end up having to do the TOK course online. Then that's another extra cost for the family if it fits in the timetable. That's the main issue, and also it's really hard. That's just something that we try to make sure the students know. So for the option that we advise is the summer course, but there are a few other ways too. Yeah.
In the fall, there are a couple of experience days or open days from the Dutch universities, but some of them are during weekdays. Is the school open for this or that?
Yeah, the students just have to talk to their head of year. We don't give out permissions to miss school, but they have to talk to their head of year, and sometimes it depends on what's happening that day. You know, if there's a big test, then probably that will not be allowed. But yeah,
But generally, the school's pretty good
yeah,
with this.
yeah.
On the 80 universities that came here, do you have like a table that shows what the average total score is for each of those universities?
No.
Yeah, we don't. It's a good question. Universities don't like to distribute that kind of information, and it's depending on the university. Either it's something that's very straightforward and publicly available if they set a minimum requirement, or in the cases of universities that admit in a more holistic fashion, they tend not to want to put that out there because then students sort of treat it as like, oh, I've got this, I'm getting in, and it's often very
What about
contextual.
from your experience though? Because you mentioned that
That
some
we do
schools-
have, yeah. I think this is something that we do have quite a bit of experience with. At what sort of threshold students become viable candidates, at what kinds of thresholds they become very likely candidates, and then also in terms of their profile, what are the things that if they're in that middle territory, what would make their application stronger or weaker? And so
Can you
that's a
make
big
that
part of the
available,
advising
or just-
process.
Can you make that available for at least the 80 universities that come visit or have visited?
I just
It's
don't think
a-
any of that could be put into a table.
It's complicated because it really depends on the particular profile of the student.
Of course. I mean,
So-
those are just guidelines and not rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, especially for the U.S. universities, what students can do is to what's published is the average SAT scores, average grade. So that gives them a sense of where things are. Again, there are other countries like in the UK. It will be very straightforward. We need the student to have 32 points and 3 sevens in their higher levels, or something like that. Very, very specific, but. Particularly, I think with the U.S., it's because it's a holistic application. It's more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Ingrid was saying, particularly looking at sort of where that middle 50 percentile for SAT and ACT scores are, international students who said generally don't score quite as high, but seeing that lower bar of the middle 50 percentile as being a nice
How many
indicator.
students from UWC take the SATs?
In the last,
35% are going to the States.
much higher than that, well over 50% are taking it, probably closer to 70. I don't. Caroline,
70% of UWC students take the SATs?
I think, what would you
That
say?
seems very high.
Is it as high as that?
Probably. Well, I think
35%
the
are
numbers
going to the States.
the numbers will be changing in this, starting with this new DP1 class, because it used to be that the majority of our residential students were applying to the U.S. and the residential students were the majority. But that's not a clear majority anymore.
Yeah.
So I think those numbers are going to change drastically. What we also always see happening is that the students who are unsure of what they're doing, they tend to just go and take the SAT or ACT just in case, which we try to advise against, but some of them do that very often, even though we know that they're going to stay in Europe.
And last question, do you have a list of the U.S. schools that do not require an SAT and ACT?
The majority do for international students, unfortunately. There are a few that do, but
Fairtest.org
we'll
is
have some.
the best compilation. Fairtest is an advocacy group that is trying to, and I support a lot of their work, but trying to reduce the importance of standardized testing, and they compile the most complete list of which schools are what's known as test optional. But Ingrid's point is an important one, that for international students, those policies can sometimes be subtly different. And with the new SAT having come in the last year, it's always a little bit in flux, but fair test is usually where I start when I'm looking at that.
When I studied, there were loads of students who didn't pass the first year straight away, and they needed more time in the first year or the second year, or whatever. Has it any consequence for the financial aid if you fail in passing the first year, and does it stop and you have to come back? Or
That's a really good question, and it's actually a big difference in systems. It's part of something that I think sometimes students think that because Dutch universities are general entry and you just need the diploma, that makes them of a lower academic standard. And it's that the threshold is really the cutoff that many students don't pass their first year. Whereas in the UK and in the US, that's much, much less common, and there's pretty substantial student support to make that even less likely. So a lot of these schools will publish, 93, 95% graduation rates, within 5 years. The financial aid, though, is 4 years, and so that's an incentive. If students are on that financial aid, there isn't an extra window for the support. But it doesn't. My wife's a master's student here in the Netherlands, and the frequency with which students fail courses is something that took some adjustment for her. That the system in different systems, that's much less common in the UK as well.
I've just got a question about residency. For a student who has a Dutch and British passport, but who has been resident in Europe with the Netherlands only for 2 years, would they be eligible for UK application, or would they have to take a year off to make 3 years?
That will probably be the case because it's a 3-year minimum residence. Yeah. However, each university also has a questionnaire that the student can fill out. They need to request it to that particular university just to be 100% sure what's their fee status. And we always recommend that to the students that are uncertain, just so that they know before they actually hit submit on that application. Yep.
Do you offer any of the specific exams required for universities in the UK or the US?
We do.
So like the really specific ones, like
if they're through Cambridge assessments,
We do.
we offer those.
Yeah. The one we don't offer is the LNAT, so the one for law. And
The UK CAT is the other one that you have to go to Brussels or to Amsterdam for that.
What's the required knowledge that you're supposed to have for doing the ACT or the SAT or the passing? Like what knowledge like about math or these type of things?
so what's always recommended is that you prepare for the exam itself. So that you're studying and preparing for that exam rather than assuming that the knowledge that you have it's enough, just because it's a test that is a little bit tricky. But all of our students take it, no matter what level of math they're in, no matter what English they're doing, everybody has to do it.
And that said, all 3 of the IB math courses, Math Studies, Math Standard, and Math Higher Level, cover the vast majority, if not all, of the topics that are on those tests, if not in precisely the same formulation. So it's not that being in Math Studies means that you wouldn't do well on it. When it comes to vocabulary, it's reading and vocabulary in English, and often that is something that's worth practicing.
Yeah. So that's why we often recommend that students take it in the fall semester of their DP2 so they can have the summer to prepare for the exam itself. Of course, if you have the time to prepare before that, that's great, but that's also just up to each student.
I think it's also worth noting that outside of the absolute most selective U.S. universities, the overwhelming emphasis is on students' grades in school and their IB grades, and that the SAT and ACT, they're not insignificant, but they're a much smaller factor. At the most selective schools, all of the students who are applying are just outstanding in almost every way, and so you really need the full package. But even there, they do understand the difference between growing up with English as your only language in a school system that prepares you with a lot of emphasis on those tests, and growing up in an international context, and that international context is valued. but it doesn't translate necessarily to perfect scores on those tests. Thank you. Oh, we got another question. Yeah, I like the students' questions.
So you said there are really few scholarships available for the U.S. universities. Is it like just really hard to get these scholarships because they prioritize the U.S. students, or you just don't get any scholarships?
No. So it's not that they prioritize U.S. students. It's that those scholarships tend to be academic based. So that means that they'll be looking at your transcripts, so the grades that you have, your SAT scores, things like that. And there are few that are, full that will cover everything. Our students do get scholarships, but they tend to be small scholarships, and usually they tend to be combined with the financial aid package.
You can combine both.
Yeah, they can be combined, but that's,
Because I thought it was either.
No, they
No.
they often are lumped in that.
Yeah.
The last question.
Sure.
How do the scholarship students that go to UWC here affect your statistics?
That is a really good one. They tend to, I feel like often they're spread all over the place. Like there's some of our very, very highest performing students, but also there's some of our students who struggle quite a bit. I think in terms of destinations, the reason why we send so many students to the U.S. is directly correlated to residential scholarship students those who don't have European citizenship and financially would not have university options except for financial aid in the U.S. I think that's where it fits in. Thank you all.
Thank
It's been
you.
a long talk. Really appreciate it.